Yep. After months of teasing a statement, Trump spoke about the issue yesterday in a 4-minute video posted to Truth Social. This is Donald Trump talking about abortion. Here's part of it.
Many people have asked me what my position is on abortion and abortion rights, especially since I was proudly the person responsible for the ending of something that all legal scholars, both sides, wanted and, in fact, demanded be ended. Roe v. Wade. They wanted it ended. It must be remembered that the Democrats are the radical ones on this position because they support abortion up to and even beyond the 9th month. The concept of having an abortion in the later months and even execution after birth, and that's exactly what it is. The baby is born, the baby is executed after birth, is unacceptable, and almost everyone agrees with that. My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land, in this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. Now it's up to the states to do the right thing. Like Ronald Reagan, I am strongly in favor of exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. You must follow your heart on this issue, but remember, you must also win elections to restore our culture.
You know, Willie, there's so many things wrong with this. I mean, so many lies that he's told. First of all, let's just start with some of the most obvious lies, Willie. He says that all legal scholars thought the Roe v. Wade should have been overturned. That's just not true. It's a huge lie. A small number of legal scholars thought that. There were many legal scholars across the spectrum that said it wasn't the most well-reasoned decision, but they weren't calling for the overturning of Roe v. Wade. More importantly, he talked about the will of the people. You can just look. I've said this before. You can just look across the decades. And one poll after another poll, when you ask people, do you want Roe v. Wade to be overturned? It's like 30%, 31%, 32%. It's always a radical minority. And in the case of do you want Roe v. Wade to stay in place, the number was 70, 71, 72% when the Supreme Court overturned it. So that's false. He talks about the will of the people. I mean, what's so shocking here is that when you only have a third of the people wanting to overturn a constitutional precedent of 49, 50 years, it's a radical move. And so this, and of course, the biggest lie out of all of that is the whole idea that Democrats are running around wanting babies to be executed after birth. Again,
I mean, it's so stupid. It's difficult to get I mean, he's just.
It is so stupid.
So stupid.
We had a Republican on this show. I'm not going to name his name, and neither is Mika, where we kept pressing and asking, how many abortions are performed in the third trimester? How many? I don't know. Well, yeah, you don't know because it's like next to zero. But Donald Trump lies. You know, I saw something, I think it was Dan Pfeiffer, that was talking about the fact that Donald Trump last week said that Joe Biden snorted cocaine before the State of the Union address. Now, that would have been on the front page of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, every other newspaper in America, if anybody else, any other candidate running for president had said something so crazy. Everybody just blew past it. And he's allowed to give these abortion statements where he's just lying through his teeth constantly. Yeah. And people they will try to make him sound like a normal candidate. Oh, well, Trump came out saying that he's a big champion of federalism and he wants to keep it at the state level. And he's for the... No, you got to talk about this, the crazy lies, which is what the guy is doing every day and what he did in this speech. And by the way, even though he was lying through his teeth constantly about abortion, he ended up pissing off people on both sides.
Yeah, let's let him keep talking.
He did. He did. Obviously, Democrats didn't like what he said, but pro-life Republicans hated what he said. They want a national abortion ban. He said nothing about that. He said, my hands are clean of this now. It's a states' rights issue. And that is the statement you get, the one we just heard from former President Trump, when you are completely unprincipled on something. When you were pro-choice, by his own words, he said he was pro-choice for a very long time. Then when he got into politics, decided it would be more advantageous to run as a Republican, to be pro-life. He's been all over the place. Remember that famous exchange with Chris Matthews in 2016, where Chris said, should a woman who gets an abortion be published? He paused. The gears are turning. What do conservatives think about this? Yes, women should be punished. So he doesn't quite believe anything on this, or maybe he just is pro-choice. And he unleashed this. Let's be very clear, Gene Robinson. Donald Trump has taken credit for and bragged about appointing the 3 Supreme Court justices who got rid of Roe versus Wade. This was an achievement for him, for his supporters, for people who wanted this for 50 years. And now that he's seen the fallout from that, the political consequences, he's trying somehow to have it both ways and mitigate the political damage, saying we have to win elections, so be careful what you do in the states. I did this, I caused this, but I don't love what I'm seeing because of it, so be careful what you do in the states. All over the place yesterday.
All over the place, and he came out with a statement that makes nobody happy. You're absolutely right. Let me endorse what Joe was saying about the lies and how we just sort of blow past the accusations of infanticide and all this crazy stuff that he comes out with. But in the end, he came down on a position that obviously pro-choice Americans aren't going to like, and that pro-life Americans hate, and started hating on immediately. There were pro-life groups that came out and talking about how disappointed they were with this. Lindsey Graham, of all people, came out. Lindsey supports a 15-week national abortion ban, and he came out and said he respectfully disagrees with Trump, and Trump spent the whole rest of the afternoon just, flaying the skin of Lindsey Graham and going after him in a vicious way that he hasn't done in a while, at least since the last time he flayed Lindsey Graham. But that was some years ago. He just went nuts. He's very touchy on this. I actually think this may have some of the timing of this and everything may have something to do with Florida. The fact that abortion is going to be on the ballot in Florida, a state that Donald Trump has to win, and every place abortion has been on the ballot in this country, including states that are redder than Florida, citizens have voted to enshrine abortion rights in their state constitutions. And they'll probably do that in Florida, too.
Yeah. Every time. And you look at the states, Kentucky, Kansas, Wisconsin, every time it's been Ohio, every time it has been remotely a part of an election or a ballot measure, the pro-choice side wins overwhelmingly.
Support for abortion was always there, and it was growing over the past decade. I think since the overturning of Roe, it has crystallized the issue for anybody who was on the fence about it or didn't feel they had, any men perhaps who didn't feel as connected with it. Now we are seeing the consequences of these rights being taken away, 50 years of rights that our daughters and sons as families don't have. And they're brutal. They're very specific. They're a matter of life and death. And Donald Trump is on the wrong side of every position that exists practically on this. In a moment, we're going to show you.
Well, can I go to Charlie real quick on this before we go to the Lindsey clips?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Charlie, really quickly, and Mika is so right. There's so many people that now are that were pro-life before Dobbs that now understand the importance of Roe because of the radicalism of the states. I always, it cost me nothing to just take the position, pro-life and da-da-da, because there was that right there. And when I formulated, my thoughts over it, the governors were like George Voinovich in Ohio, Mitt Romney in Massachusetts, Jeb Bush in Florida. And the thought was, well, maybe it'll be 15, 16, 17 weeks with exceptions. That's just not the world we live in anymore. And I must say, this is post-Dobbs. You look and you see the radicalism, I'll just say it, of these old white fat men in Mississippi or somewhere else that are driving women out of medical care because they want to appeal to the most extreme elements of their base. Yeah, there are a lot of people, and I would guess you're like me. There are a lot of people who have really been transformed by the radicalism of the last 3-4 years.
Well, it's interesting watching Donald Trump because, as Willie pointed out, the first thing you need to understand about him is that he is completely unprincipled on this issue. He doesn't like it, and he's very, very worried about what you're just describing. He's worried about the political fallout. So he's trying to neutralize an issue that cannot be neutralized. So, this is one of those rare moments where, leaving aside the lies, you can actually see his thought process. He doesn't want a national ban. He wants to make sure that they support all of the exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother. He wants to reassure people about IVF. Now he's in this position where, on the one hand, he wants to claim credit for overturning Roe versus Wade. And on the other hand, but the pro-life movement, their reaction was deep disappointment. Now, what he's counting on, and he's probably right, is the people like Lindsey Graham and the pro-life movement will simply roll over, that they will say, okay, we were disappointed with this, but we're still going to support it. So he's taking them for granted. But I guess the question is whether or not, and in his mind, he thinks he's taking the least bad option, the most pragmatic option. But as you point out, I think the politics of this have changed. It's very unpredictable. He's very worried about it. The polls would indicate where the trend is going. And now he's thinking that he's taken it off the table, that he's going to turn it around and talk about how radical the Democrats are. But what does he do? What is his first opening gambit? The Democrats want to execute babies after birth, which is so ludicrous, so extreme, it's kind of eye-rolling, but that's his first play on this.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.